Hello and welcome to this edition of Wolfsburg Window with a very unusual person, Dr. Sharan, who is a power engineer but also has a lot of experience at board level both in Switzerland and in India. He has experience both with conventional energy as well as with renewable energy. He has experience not only as a technical provider but also as a buyer. So he's a very unusual all-round man that I have in the studio with me. To talk about energy globally, but also specifically in the context of India. Let me start by talking about energy with him at a global level. Hari, we hear a lot about how bad the energy situation is worldwide. Is it really that bad?
Well, it depends how you look at it. If you talk to an oil man, even yesterday somebody was saying that there is enough oil to last another 45 to 50 years. But the question is that the cost of oil is going to be going up, and the complete dependence on oil creates a lot of other problems like energy security, like the whole problem of political instability in the Middle East and so on. The second thing is that the energy situation for 1.6 billion people in the world is catastrophic because they have no access to commercial energy whatsoever. So whether it's good or bad depends entirely on how you are looking at it.
In India, of course, these two worlds, the world of people with energy and the world of people without energy, comes together.
Absolutely. In India, we also have a north and a south. The per capita consumption of the Indian rich is, I would guess, higher than the per capita consumption of the European rich. At the other end of the scale, in India, we have something like 300 million people who again have no access, they have no electricity, they have no cooking energy, they don't have any energy for drinking water, no clean drinking water. So this exists side by side. And one of the biggest challenges we have in the energy sector is to not only ensure energy security as a nation, but also provide energy security to all the people in the country.
And India is in the somewhat unusual situation of having all or nearly all of the possible energy sources, from nuclear to solar to everything.
Except that coal, which is our major source of energy, which might, even in the next 50 years, provide as much as 50 to 60% of the energy, has to be converted into electricity in a much more clean manner. Because at the moment, coal is producing a lot of pollution. All over you go, you see a fine layer of ash. It also has a big problem that it produces a high amount of carbon dioxide, which is affecting the climate change. So even in a country like India, which is not yet has a commitment to reduce CO2, we should start working on reducing CO2 in the context of the next 20 years. So the role of coal is going to be predominant, but how do we mix coal with other clean sources of energy like hydro, like renewable energy, like biomass, solar, so that maybe in a 50-year time frame, our intensity of CO2 production per unit of our GDP comes down. And at the same time, ensuring that even the poorest have a minimum amount of electricity from which they can get their jobs and get other household facilities.
In India, we've been aware of this problem for a long time. And of course, we've been wrestling with it. We've been struggling with it, partly, of course, because of the fascination that India has always had with technology for its own sake. But in spite of that, in spite of working at it for 30, 40, 50 years, we haven't really cracked it, have we?
You know, as you know very well, in the energy sector, you need minimum 10 to 15 years for any technology to take root. In India, the renewable energy R&D program has been going on for 30 years. So we have been a bit slower in getting the commercial results out of the renewable energy sources. But I would say in the last 5 years, the situation has dramatically changed. If you look at the explosion in the capacity for wind generators in India, we have today something like 4,500 megawatt of power being generated from wind sources. The technology for biomass is absolutely ready to be used. There is something like only 1,000 megawatt. But if the proper market support is given, it will explode to maybe 10,000 megawatt within the next 5 years. So, we are at the threshold where technology is no longer a barrier. The barriers are the policies and the financing.
But before we get on to that, Hari, it may be just worth covering briefly how the technological innovations that India has made in the biomass area, one renewable energy area, are different from the biomass technologies that have been developed in other parts of the world.
In biomass, you can either burn it and run a steam turbine, or you can gasify it and run an engine. Now, the technology with the steam turbine is good only for large unit ratings, at least 5 megawatts or bigger. Now, for a village situation, that's too big a size. So you need to have a technology which can run an engine. Now, this is a gasification technology which was used in the last World War for running the trucks in Germany or in Switzerland. They were all running on pieces of wood. The same technology people have been working on for the last 20 years to try and get a breakthrough. Unfortunately, one of the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore came up with a very good idea, which has produced a technology which is today world leader for their small ratings. And that is one of the technologies which came from India to Switzerland, has been adapted in Châtel-Saint-Denis in Freiburg for the Swiss conditions, and now it's been commercialized. Now this whole process, even in Switzerland, has taken us about 10 years, but now it's ready to take off.
So, Hari, coming back to the question that you were raising about what's holding these things back, you were saying it's money, it's organizational things, and it's policies.
In the policies area, the government of India has had an Electricity Act which forbade anybody to generate electricity and sell electricity. Now, this had created, of course, a vast public sector vested interest who don't have an interest in letting go of the power that they command by virtue of having this at their disposal. So it took the government a long time to change the Electricity Act, which they have done so in the last 2 or 3 years. And now you can generate electricity, you can consume it in your own cooperative or in your own village, you can consume it by using the electricity that you generate at one place for your own factory in another place. They have still not completely opened up the market that anybody can sell electricity to anybody else. But I think that will gradually come. But the conditions are now right for a large scale distributed or decentralized energy systems to come up, because all the small scale industries today are suffering from a lack of electricity, and the grid is not going to grow that fast that everybody will have sufficient electricity. So the biggest thing now is to make the government let go of some of the powers that they control through their own ministries and PSUs. If you want to do electrification of 250,000 villages, it should not be done through the government machinery. We know that it doesn't work efficiently. So that's one big policy issue. The second is to show to the private sector that investing in such small power stations in villages can be profitable. And that's what one has been trying to do, we have been trying to do, is to show that if we combine the generation of electricity with the creation of jobs through local value addition in the villages, you are making both the small scale industries and the electricity generation profitable. And this is one of the new paradigms that we are discussing at the moment, and we have to try and convince the government that they should establish a decentralized power sector.
This is an example of the huge financial opportunities that are there for Westerners or anybody else who's interested in going into India.
Well, the financial opportunity in India in the energy sector is, of course, one is in the big sector. But there you need the real big players like RWE or EDF or people like that. But for the small and medium scale industry, there is a marvelous opportunity to go into the business of contracting. Because as you know, every country is going to have to do a lot for energy savings. Now, energy savings one has been talking about for the last 20 years. It hasn't really taken off. One of the reasons is that if you set up a financial mechanism where you share the savings of energy between an investor and a user, it can go much faster. Now, the same idea of an energy supply company, where you set up a small power station as a joint venture with the small scale industry. But the small scale industry doesn't want to take on the headache of running a power station. So the opportunity to set up ESCOs or contracting companies to supply electricity on a small scale to small scale industries in India is enormous.
Enormous, yes, but how enormous, Hari?
I would say it is something like, in the totality, how soon you build it up is a different issue. But in totality, we are talking about 45,000 megawatt. So if we want to do it in 10 years or 15 years, it's at least 1,000 megawatt per year, going up to about 5,000 megawatt per year.
And what does that mean in terms of money?
$16 million for one bundle would be a decent size for an investor to go in with.
And how many such blocks are we talking about?
We are talking about minimum 20 such blocks to start with, and going up to about 100 such blocks. And this has to cover the entire country, because this is not a local situation. Even in the states as advanced as Maharashtra or Karnataka, you have villages where there is not enough electricity for doing any productive work.
So, dear colleagues, 250,000 villages, enormous amounts of money that can be made in terms of business opportunities just in India. And think of all the villages around the world where this kind of business opportunity could be replicated, both in terms of profit for investors and in terms of bettering the quality of life of people in the poorest parts of the world and at the poorest level in society. A very fascinating possibility and a fascinating challenge. Something to think about as we go about our daily business. Thank you for being with me this time, and I look forward to being with you on another occasion. Goodbye.